One, two, three. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mediation and Beyond's YouTube channel. Today, I'm very excited. I have a great guest. Senator Will Haskell's on today from Connecticut. He serves the Westport, Wilton, New Canaan, Bethel. I know I'm probably missing a couple of towns in there. Yeah, Senator Haskell, he attended the Westport Public Schools and graduated from Georgetown University. Prior to serving in the state senator, he interned for the Democratic National Committee, analyzing state legislation and fighting for voting rights. He's also assisted a community tax aid program in DC, working with low-income residents as they filed their taxes. And while at Georgetown, he helped launch the Free Speech Project, dedicated to monitoring and protecting the freedom of expression, which obviously is a huge thing today, so need to continue in that vein. Connecticut, Senator Haskell developed a passion for improving our criminal justice system after working with Connecticut's Office of the Public Defender. We have a lot of similarities here, Senator Haskell, where he helped connect low-income defendants with social workers and attorneys. He's worked on a variety of local, state, and federal campaigns, including those of U.S. Senator Chris Murphy and Congressman Jim Hines. And in high school, Senator Haskell drew national attention to the issue of cyberbullying at Staples High School, another obviously a huge issue. After graduating from Georgetown, he returned to Westport, and he decided to run for office with the mission of drawing other recent graduates back to Connecticut. As the Senate chairman of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee, he's laser focused on providing businesses with 21st century workforce they need in order to thrive in Connecticut, which is why we need more people to kind of return after college. He's got an eye towards Connecticut's future, and he's determined to help build a state that is affordable and appealing to every generation. So thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Colleen. So thrilled to join you.
Absolutely. And so I have as a former teacher and now doing a lot of family work with, I had a private therapy practice, and now it's morphed into more divorce mediation work. But I wanted to bring you on today because I wanted to discuss what, obviously we have COVID-19 going on and still in the pandemic, although kudos to Connecticut for kind of really flattening that curve. Like, I'm very proud to be a Connecticut citizen, because it's an honor to know that, your fellow Connecticut individuals, that they've come together and really worked hard at doing what we were told we needed to do. So, but now returning to school, there's anxiety not only with children about returning, because they have their own fears because of what they hear, and a lot of misinformation and then a lot of good information, so it's hard to decipher. And then you have parents kids obviously hear parents talking at home, maybe even differing views on the whole, should we go back, should we not go back? So I wanted to hear from you about where the state is at right now and what the plans are going forward as of today, knowing it can change at any given moment.
Yeah, it's such a great question. It is the $1 million, or probably the $1 billion question, is to how to safely reopen our schools in a way that keeps students safe, their families safe, and also the teachers who show up every day to do their job, how to make sure that they don't fall victim to this terrible pandemic. Like you said, Connecticut's done a really great job. We were hit early on, especially in nursing homes, through aggressive executive orders and other public health tools. Connecticut has really mitigated the spread of this virus. We're now one of the lowest positivity rates in the country. We've got pretty widespread access to testing, but even when folks are tested, we're not seeing a lot of positivity rates. We've got a pretty strict travel advisory. So, over 30 states now, if you come to Connecticut, you have to quarantine for 14 days. We've done a lot of things really well. And we don't want to jeopardize all of that progress as we move towards September and start thinking about reopening schools. And what I keep telling constituents who ask about this is, look, there are no good answers. It is a really bad option to keep students at home, not just for academic reasons, but also we know that social and emotional learning really takes a hit when students are, connecting with their teachers and with their classmates through Zoom. We also know that sending everybody back into the classroom might be foolish, might risk restarting this horrible pandemic. So without any good options, we're trying to find an adequate middle ground here in Connecticut. And like you said, Colleen, I think Governor Lamont's done a really admirable job putting science before politics, letting our public health officials lead the way. But I'll be honest, I pushed Governor Lamont really hard on the schools issue recently, making sure that districts had the flexibility that they needed to make decisions about how to return students to the classroom. The state felt really strongly that we had to move towards full reopening. If parents were going to go back to work in September, we needed to get kids back in the classroom. And remote learning went well in the 7 towns that I represent because they're a little bit better resourced. But if you look at some of our neighboring towns, particularly in cities, there are whole city blocks where students don't have access to Wi-Fi, don't have a laptop at home that they can use, don't have access to books, so that at-home learning is frankly just not as productive. So the state's position for a while was everyone's got to go back to school. But I'm really happy to say that after getting a lot of feedback from folks in my community, the governor's team decided, and the State Department of Education decided, to actually allow districts a little bit more flexibility. So now, take Wilton, for example. Wilton can say, and I don't know what Wilton will say, I'm not sure that they've made a decision yet, but it is in their menu of options that they can say, okay, we're going to send every kid in elementary school back, but in the high school, because of cohorting is a little bit more difficult in a secondary school environment because it's more challenging to figure out lunch blocks, we're going to do a hybrid model where some students return on Monday, Tuesday, some students return on Thursday, Friday, maybe Wednesday is a flex day. Now districts have a little bit more flexibility. So over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to see districts roll out in hyper-specific plans exactly what they plan to do in terms of transportation, in terms of PPE for teachers, in terms of cohorting. But what I would personally expect a lot of districts to do is prioritize getting the youngest kids back in the classroom first. It's important for social and emotional health. It's important for academic reasons, but it's really important to the success of our state workforce. People can't go back to work if they don't have a place for their kids to be during the day. So I think that as districts now have the flexibility to make those decisions, they're really going to prioritize getting elementary school kids back. And then in situations where it's possible, where it's plausible, where it's healthy, they're going to try to get every high school student back into the classroom. But some districts may decide on a hybrid model. I apologize for the long answer, but it's
right. And when you say elementary, are you speaking K-8? Are you speaking K-5?
Depends on the district. My experience of elementary school in the Westport Public Schools was K-5, but obviously the grades change depending on which district you're representing. Schools are famously in Connecticut a matter of local control. There are some major problems with that, right? It means that Westport's able to spend more than $20,000 per pupil, while nearby Bridgeport is able to spend less than $15,000 per pupil. But ultimately, where local control is so important in this pandemic is making sure that those who are closest to the situation are making the policy decisions about what to do this fall. I'm talking about the teachers union sitting down, and local teachers union sitting down with the superintendent, sitting down with the PTA, figuring out what that community can do to keep their staff and their students safe. And I don't think it should be a politician in Hartford making that decision. I think it should be a public health official on the ground in that district.
And how does it work? So let's hypothetically, you're going to send the little ones back, and then you have a teacher who's I don't know, she's near retiring, or he's near retiring at 60 something years old, which would put that person in a little bit of a higher risk group. Do you allow that teacher to go back, or do you keep that teacher in a different capacity doing online, and then send somebody back in their stead who's kind of younger? Does that throw a wrench in unions? Teachers.
And ultimately, these are decisions that are made by the superintendent and their director of HR for each district. I have heard just anecdotally of some teachers who were nearing retirement deciding that, they didn't feel safe going back right away. I've heard of other districts that are making accommodations for those teachers so that, they might be able to do a little bit more from home, to come into the school less frequently. Again, it's such an individualized matter, but I know that districts, every superintendent I talk to, and I'm on the phone with these folks a lot, right, they're really doing everything they can to make sure that teachers have flexibility, but also that families have flexibility. And this is something that I neglected to bring up, but it's crucial to the state's plan. Any child who would prefer to learn from home, any parent who is nervous about sending their kid back into the classroom under any outcome here, whether we're doing full remote learning, whether we're doing full in person, or whether it's a hybrid, right, it is part of the state of Connecticut's plan that every family has the opportunity to do distance learning if they would prefer. That means that if you have grandparents at home and you're worried about your second grader going back into the classroom and bringing COVID-19 home, if you would prefer, your child has to have options available given by the school district so that they can learn from home, from the safety of your living room. So that's a really important flexibility mechanism that is built in for every teacher and every family. And I get a lot of panicked emails saying, I don't want to send my kids back to school. My district is moving towards full reopening. I hope that we're doing an okay job at getting the message out there. I think we can do a better job of getting the message out there in this state, saying that decision is entirely in your hands.
Okay. And so is going back to school, no matter what age, K to 12, and for teachers, is it mask mandated in our will it be mask mandated in our public schools?
That's correct. There is not only social distancing taking place and cohorting in the elementary school, but also a mask mandate. Now I don't know if you've ever worn a mask for 8 hours. I did it recently. We went up to the state capitol. It was really challenging. So I know that teachers and administrators are getting creative about taking mask breaks for students where they can all go outside in a socially distant way, take off their mask for a little bit, almost like a recess period. But yes, masks will be mandated. And actually, you know what I've been hearing, Colleen, it's kind of interesting. I was just talking to a superintendent a few weeks ago who said they're trying out this mask mandate for some of the summer programs, and they're finding that actually young people are having an easier time than some of the adults with masks.
Probably.
It just shows, I think, the resilience of kids. It reminds me of the fact I went to Saugatuck Elementary School here in Westport way before this pandemic started. And I noticed all the kids composting, carefully getting up from their lunch table, kindergartners, scraping off their food into the appropriate bins. These are habits that, as a matter of public policy, we have a lot of trouble getting adults to adopt. And yet kids, they actually bring the habits home and they're teaching their families. So I'm cautiously optimistic that the mask mandate is going to work out because kids are pretty resilient and flexible.
Yeah, I actually think kids will be happy to be back to seeing friends and those kinds of things. So we know that viruses stay on hard surfaces. I think we still realize that, or at least that's the most current research that I've read up on. So like things like bathrooms and all, how do you protect, I worked in Waterbury for nearly a decade, and, I don't think Westport schools are as large, but, I have 1,500 kids in a school. There's X number of bathrooms. Each area has a bathroom for an area or a floor. How do you will people be hired to kind of go in and be walking around wiping things down?
It's a really great question. So we know that the two ways the virus has spread based on public health officials, first is airborne particles is a huge concern. So a lot of the schools in my district are updating their air filters to something that's a little bit more safe and secure. And then the other thing, to your point, the other way that we know the virus can spread is through surfaces. And that's why districts are really going above and beyond I don't know the answer to your question about additional staffing, but they are buying more disinfectant. They're buying more supplies. They're scheduling more cleaning shifts. They're doing all sorts of things that we would have never thought about before to keep our schools in pristine shape. And by the way, none of that is cheap. So a brief political interlude here is that we desperately need help from the federal government. Connecticut luckily has a rainy day fund of just over $2.5 billion, money that we had saved away for a rainy day. This is a rainy day, but the rainy day fund is not going to keep the lights on forever. And the federal government, we're enormously grateful. We got $27 million initially, and then the CARES Act passed, as you may remember, in a bipartisan manner in Washington, and that brought $111 million down to Connecticut schools. But the school districts in my area already know, and we're weeks out, that they're going to have to spend a lot more money on additional staffing, on additional cleaning supplies, on additional technology to make distance learning feasible for every student. So there's a lot of costs associated with this, and Connecticut's doing everything we possibly can, but we're praying that it is a bipartisan policy priority in Washington that K through 12 schools ought to have the funds they need to do this reopening safely.
And I remember reading a while back, and I haven't followed up, and I don't know that you'll know the answer to this question, but I remember President Trump saying if the schools didn't reopen on a full-time basis, that they would be pulling federal funding from districts or from states. Is that still in play, or do you know the status of that?
The federal government has really dug their heels in the ground. I don't know of any more specific comments since President Trump said that, but you can bet that it raised a lot of alarm bells here in the state of Connecticut because federal funding is crucial to keeping our schools open, especially those under-resourced schools. It's so key to the school lunch program, which, schools are not only an academic, not only a social and emotional learning center, but they actually feed a lot of students across the state of Connecticut. Thousands and tens of thousands of students rely on public school cafeterias for nutritious meals. So it raised a lot of alarm bells when the president said that, and it just reinforces the point that it should not be a politician in Hartford or in Washington deciding whether or not your local school opens. It should be your superintendent working with public health officials on the ground to make that very, very individualized and unique decision.
Okay, I got that. So again, going back to why you're giving districts or more control over what the needs are of their community, and on a federal level, kind of have to wait and see kind of how that kind of falls out. One of the questions I have doing the divorce work I do, and you might have two parents, so the children, go back and forth or shared parenting, however that schedule looks, and you have one parent who says, I'm all for my kids going back to school, and I, want them to go back, and we'll see what happens. And then you have another parent who's very, on a different level and says, I'm not comfortable yet. I'd like to wait that out. Not that I'm not asking for legal advice here or telling a parent what to do, but do you see that? Would that just really be like saying to the kind of districts, do what you need, or how do you see that affecting parental choice? Actually, you could be married and still on opposite ends of the spectrum too. So how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I hear from families all the time, and sometimes I actually do a lot of cold calling to my constituents now that I can't go out and knock on doors, and they'll put me on speakerphone, and the wife wants to do something and the husband wants to do something else. So to your point, I'm not sure that disagreement is only going to be in divorced families, but let me just say, my heart really goes out to kids who are growing up in non-traditional families during this pandemic. I grew up in a family of divorced parents. I did every other weekend at my dad's house, but my mom's a divorce attorney, so I know that it's increasingly common to do 3-2-3 or split time more evenly. And in a pandemic, that can be, it can pose all sorts of challenges to social distancing, to the family decision about whether or not to go back to school. I'm very biased because I always wanted to make decisions for myself, but I would hope that so long as the kids are old enough, that parents out there listen to what their kids want to do, what they think is appropriate. And by the way, it's not that once you make a decision, you're locked in. So a kid could go to school for 2 weeks and then decide that the next week they want to do remote learning. They could go to school on a Wednesday and by Friday be back in a distance learning situation. So school districts are granting day-by-day flexibility to families and to students to make that decision. We keep hearing like, stay safe, stay home. That was Connecticut's motto for a few months. Now it's, if you have to ask, wear a mask. But for a while it was stay safe, stay home. That means a lot of different things to a lot of different families. I spoke to survivors of domestic violence who said, that's actually contradictory for me. When you say stay safe and stay home, I feel very unsafe in my home. We also have to recognize that stay safe, stay home. While many folks out there are just quarantining with their nuclear family, for other kids, that means a long time being separated from one parent, or it means bouncing between households and facing all sorts of difficult quarantine requirements. So my heart goes out to those families, and I just want those kids to know that we're thinking about them too. And sometimes these short and snappy mottos don't encapsulate their experience, but their experience is valid and it matters. And we want to make sure that all public policy takes into account families of all types.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because none of this is going to be cookie cutter and one size fits all, right? I mean, it just isn't, and people are going to have to adapt to what meets the needs of that particular family. What is the backup plan if hypothetically a school had to shut down for some reason? Is there a backup plan just to put everybody back online learning? And does that include those districts such as, like, I worked in Waterbury or Bridgeport, more the inner city, where I know in Waterbury early on for a long while, it was handing out packets because the kids don't have the Wi-Fi and they don't have access to laptops and computers. And I think that finally kind of worked itself out. But will we be seeing it? We talk about going forward, but is there a backup plan from the state in case this doesn't work out?
It's a really great question. So to your point, remote learning happened so quickly in the spring, and kids were in class on a Monday, and by Friday they were also supposed to be learning from home. It didn't give teachers a lot of time to prepare lesson plans, and it didn't give districts time to distribute resources to those families that didn't have Wi-Fi, didn't have books, didn't have laptops. some lessons have been learned. Some students really lost out on a spring semester. So first of all, a lot of teachers and administrators I've spoken to have adjusted their curriculum to make sure that they make up for all of that lost time, so that students are back on the same page and that they can pick up right where they left off. But yes, to answer your question more directly, every district had to provide the state with 3 very detailed plans. One was the full reopening, one was a hybrid model, and one was a full distance learning. And the full distance learning had to meet certain state criteria in terms of being robust and accessible to all. And we know that some districts struggle with this much more than others. That's why in the nearby city of Bridgeport, I believe the state set up a large trailer so that Wi-Fi could be accessible throughout the neighborhood. The Dalio partnership, by the way, has been, the Dalio Philanthropies, I should say, has been an amazing resource in getting book bags and book packs and laptops out to students. And they just announced another ambitious venture for this fall, getting tens of thousands of laptops out to students. It's not nearly enough, right? We know that remote learning will never replace the classroom experience, but we're continuing to strive to do better. And we definitely have lessons learned since last spring. So my hope for this fall is that we get as many students as possible safely back in the classroom. If there is an outbreak, if COVID-19 returns, if the public health indicators show that we need to close schools, hopefully every district will be prepared to quickly transition to a fully remote environment without skipping a beat in terms of academic progress.
And I don't want to leave out, Will, you know, we talk K-12, but our university and college students here in the state of Connecticut, I don't want to neglect for anybody that might, you know, listen to this, you know, they're like, well, where are the college university students? So where does the state stand with university students?
Okay, great question, and something that I actually get to focus a lot on as the chairman of the Senate chairman of the Higher Education Committee. Our schools in Connecticut are planning on reopening, and they have really aggressive testing measures. So UConn, our flagship university, is the testing situation that I'm actually most familiar with. They're going to test every student when they come back to campus. And then 2 weeks later, they're going to test every student again. And by the way, that's really expensive. And then throughout this semester, they're going to do a random sampling of testing to keep an eye on those who might have COVID-19, who are experiencing symptoms, but also asymptomatic testing. There are all sorts of really difficult decisions about sports on college campuses. Some of those negotiations and this considerations are ongoing. But let me give a quick pitch to our 13 community colleges here in Connecticut, 12 in person and 1 online. For the first time in Connecticut's history, this fall, community college is going to be tuition free. And that means we did that actually before there was a pandemic. It's called the PACT program, but it's all that much more needed at this time when so many folks are out of a job, when they're struggling to figure out what to do in this unique and challenging economic time, to make sure that that they too have an opportunity to pursue a degree is something that's really important to the state of Connecticut in terms of workforce development. We know
that's fantastic. I had no idea about that, and I'm not sure the word is fully out on that one, but because I just had a mother in Wilton, a very good friend of mine, and she said, you know, my son's probably not going to go back. He was going to start at Miami of Ohio. He's not going to go probably start. And she goes, I don't know what to do with him. And she goes, out community college, I don't know. And
Ct.edu/PACT, PACT. I hope everyone checks it out. You have to fill out the FAFSA. That's the free application for federal student aid. And you have to fill out a few other forms. But already, I was just looking at the numbers a few days ago, more than 2,200 students have signed up. So I really hope that more folks take advantage of this. A quick caveat, it has to be your first time enrolling in college. You have to have graduated from a high school in Connecticut. But we know that this is game-changing for so many students who otherwise didn't think that college was affordable.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. I actually would like to see that stay.
Me too. I'm working on that, Colleen. Yeah. We're going to try.
I want to ask, and then I'll probably wrap this up for you, but I wanted to ask about, you know, we used to call it the Connecticut Mastery Test. I think it's called something else now for state testing for kids K-12. And so what about the standardized testing, not the SATs and PSATs, that's its own element, but are we holding children to that same standard of testing, or will that be altered, adjusted?
It's a good question, and I don't have all of the details in front of me, but I put it up on a Facebook Live conversation I had with 4 superintendents in our area who all said that they are going to do a little bit of testing to see how students, how much they actually learned while they were at home, how much summer reading loss is inevitable, but the depth of summer reading loss is something that a lot of teachers are going to want to know. That being said, they're going to, my understanding of our conversation was that they're going to deprioritize some of the standardized tests in making sure that teachers meet students where they are and try to get them up to speed. So I don't have all the details in front of me, but I do know that the superintendents I've spoken to are really going to focus on meeting every individual student's need, bringing them up to speed, testing where they are a little bit when they get back, but probably not the aggressive standardized test calendar that we normally
So maybe use it more as a gauge to get to see where everyone is at.
Yeah, we know that there was probably, quite a bit of summer reading loss. That's inevitable, but hopefully we can, this fall, make up for that lost time.
Okay, got that. So on a final note, Senator Haskell, what do you want, this is a little twofold, what do you want parents to know at this point, and what do you want children to know?
Great question. Okay, for parents, let's start with be in touch with your local school district. Yes, tune in to the governor's daily press conference, check out things that I do on my Facebook page, but the most important and the most informative, the most influential conversation that you should have as you decide whether or not to send your child back to the classroom is going to be the public conversations that your local superintendent hosts, because they will walk through what's second grade going to look like. How is the middle school cafeteria going to cohort? Which high school students are going to come back, and are they going to have band and orchestra and choir where we know, there's a higher risk of spreading COVID, or how are they going to adjust some of the extracurricular activities? So many of these decisions are being made on the local level that it's so important as a parent to be in frequent communication with your superintendent. If you don't know how to reach out to them, or if you're not sure, whether or not they're hosting public meetings, I happen to know that most of them are. So feel free to contact my office, and I'm happy to put you in touch. For students, know that we know being home all this time has taken a real toll on mental health. We know that feelings of isolation and anxiety and depression are rampant among young people, and that's only been exacerbated by the pandemic. That's why we are working so hard to figure out how to get you back into the classroom in a way that's safe for your teacher and safe for your classmates. And it's not going to look exactly the same. Desks are going to be a little bit further apart. You'll be wearing a mask all day, but ultimately, we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to see your friends again this fall, and we want to make sure that we can do that without jeopardizing the health of the teacher standing in front of the classroom. So we've got our work cut out for us. We've got a lot of resources that we're going to spend here in Connecticut, because we know that people move to this state largely because we've got some of the best schools in the entire country. We do not want to jeopardize that. We're going to continue to invest in our public schools.
And Will, how would people get a hold of you?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. 860-240-0068 is my office phone number. You can always visit my website or Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter as well. I spend 80% of my day responding to emails, it feels like. So I look forward to hearing from folks.
And what would your let's send people to your Facebook page. Is it just Senator Will Haskell, or how would they find you?
State Senator Will Haskell, it'll come up.
Okay. All right. Well, good enough. Well, thank you so much. This was really informative. I've learned stuff, and I appreciate you taking time to let your constituents and the rest of everybody who's going to watch us kind of know what's going on in Connecticut and know where things stand, and realize that it's kind of going with the flow right now, but being smart about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for all that you do, Colleen. Thank you for having me, and stay healthy.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.